topics. King and country. Would you serve?
That's Russia claiming Alaska.
To me, just understand that he signed something today that said the sale of Alaska is illegitimate.
Right.
Well, I think I speak for all of us in the U.S. government to say that certainly he is not getting it back.
But honestly, so they're in denial. They're just lying to people. Which one would you say it is? Or playing the game?
I mean, who says they're going to be worse than the Tories as a brag?
Hello and welcome back to another Sunday Roast, and we have two wonderful guests back again. Bowler Hat Man, can you tell us a bit about yourself?
A up, as we say, from Yorkshire. I'm Bowler Hat Man from the deepest, darkest Yorkshire. The best part of the UK by far. I know those Lancastrians will claim otherwise, but Yorkshire were the best. So as always, I like to talk about politics, like to talk about sort of foreign affairs especially. But yeah, that's what I do. That's what I talk about on the YouTubes.
Very good. And we have Big Maj Studio. Big Maj, can you tell us a bit about yourself for anyone who's new to the show?
Just watch my one from last week.
Did you see that they shut down the Young Conservatives? It's gone.
Really? They ran out of 50-year-olds to start.
Young-looking 50-year-olds, yeah. And then you'll know. But no, I cover UK politics. Yeah, it's fun because our country's, well, I say the country, the union is completely messed up. There's always something new to talk about with the union because we don't mess around here.
And my wonderful co-host Alex, can you tell us a bit about yourself for anyone who's new to the show?
Hi, I'm Alex, also known as Political X. I'm a YouTuber, I'm a journalist, I'm a historian, author. I even coached a bit of football back in the day. Max, my wonderful co-host, can you please introduce yourself?
Hi guys, my name is Max. I run the Robespierre channel where I talk about British politics and Brexit in particular. Alex, would you be willing to join the army?
We were just saying before we came on, we were talking about the monarchy last week, king and country and all of that. Interesting bit of research I ended up doing. The SAS character who claimed that he was there on operation with Diana. It turns out I found an article claiming that in 2017 he'd been brought back into the fold of the SAS. I don't know what to make of it. One minute the police are saying there's nothing here and everyone's claiming he's got mental health problems, to now we need him because apparently, and I think in agreement with this group, we have recruitment issues. So who in this group is up for king and country and charging the line and taking on the Russians? Maj, you game?
I'm not gonna lie, guys. If I'm being conscripted, then we are in a very desperate situation because I am not the guy you want. I've played enough Call of Duty to know I can't shoot straight to save my life. I bought a new game recently called Ready or Not, and yeah, there was a guy with a gun. I thought, okay, I'm gonna shout at him to put his gun down. No, he shot me first, and I was like, okay, cool, bro. And yeah, I died twice in that game. So no, you don't want me. Trust me, I'm the last guy you want to be conscripted. Look, just don't.
Ollie, what about you?
I think it depends on the circumstances. I think if you're talking about the country being invaded like Ukraine clearly has been, I think, there might be no choice. I'd be quite happy to go and sort of defend the UK for certainly being invaded. Like I say, I think that is sort of firms part of what I sort of believe, that if the UK was invaded, I'd gladly, join up. I probably wouldn't go on the front lines. I'd probably end up in like logistics or something like that. But if it came down to it and, the UK was being invaded, yeah, I'd go for it. But the main problem at the moment is, as you said, there's a recruitment problem, not just in the army, but in the Royal Navy as well. This comes from, unfortunately, budget cuts, because guess what? Recruitment's been outsourced. Guess who to? Capita, everyone's favorite outsourcer. So, yeah, this is really down to sort of, once again, private companies thinking they can do better than the actual government in doing something and failing spectacularly. But the other thing I think that we should do is certainly increase wages and have a fundamental rethink of what we actually want our armed forces to be. I don't think, to be honest, we need a navy that can go here, there, and everywhere all over the world. I think we need a far sort of more smaller navy that can sort of patrol coastal waters and sort of defend out to the Atlantic as well. But we don't really need to be going all the way to the Asia Pacific unless we really have to. But at that point, I think that would be more a joint operation to probably help defend South Korea against North Korea, because, well, Kim Jong-un's decided he might want to invade there. And of course, I think certainly defending the democracy in Taiwan would also be something well worth organizing an international coalition to help defend.
It's not very politically popular spending money on the military at the moment, especially during a cost of living crisis. So I don't know how they're going to justify more military spending in order to recruit more. But also, like young people today I've been just looking into this a little bit, and people on the left are like, okay, well, why should I fight for the country? The government don't give a crap about me. There's the cost of living crisis. They don't care about providing housing, providing decent wages for soldiers and members of the Navy. But on the right, they're saying, well, I don't want to fight for this country either because the Tories just want to flood the country with immigrants. So this is the argument on the right. So there doesn't seem to be much appetite for joining. Like, how could the government or a future government convince people to sign up? Anyone have any ideas? Alex?
I don't even know if it'll get to that. We'll just fire nukes at each other. That's like the first response. It's bizarre that we're getting into this level of conscription talk. I've seen a couple of people on Twitter from right-wing media saying they wouldn't fight, but you're like, yeah, but you're meant to be the nationalists. You're the guys that are gun-ho. But I'll also say I've never seen any of them slag off the Russian embassy. And the Russian embassy have tweeted some horrific stuff about us.
For many years, West has been establishing a neo-Nazi and Russophobic regime in Ukraine, flooding it with weapons. USA, UK and EU do not hide plans to recklessly invest in fighting Russia on the battlefield, using hands and lives of Ukrainians who are seen as entirely expendable. UK continues to discredit SMO in Ukraine and provide military support for Nazi regime in Kiev. Thus, 30 heads of British organizations in charge of coordinated anti-Russian disinformation campaign. History will eventually and inevitably pass its judgment on the current crimes committed by the Ukrainian Nazis and their Western patrons.
Absolute silence. I've pulled up some of the right-wing trolls that we regularly see on Twitter as well about it. They look at you as if you're the odd one for bringing up the Russian embassy that is literally in the UK, tweeting how much we're garbage, how much we're useless, that we're the Nazis. They're calling us Nazis. And our right-wing trolls just carry on and ignore them. I don't know. In fact, led by donkeys, they're the only ones that seem to have done any activism to be sort of throwing it back at the Russian embassy. No one else has. Oh, and in Ireland, Max.
In Ireland, yeah, there's calls for the Russian embassy to be closed. Also, calls for the Israeli embassy to be closed. But I don't know if that's going to happen in the UK, though.
Do you remember the gates got rammed? I love that. Well done. The guys that you would expect to be the most patriotic, frontline, I don't see it. Unless they've already been recruited into the army. Am I missing something here, or am I poking there?
I think it's all bravado.
They're not about that life. Let's be honest now. Like, they'll talk a big game, post pictures of Templar Knights and stuff like that, but it's like you're not going to be on the front lines. Let's be honest.
Picture that reformation of the Roman Empire.
What did Trump have? Bone spurs. That's what they'll be saying. Oh, I've got like a knee injury, like a torn ligament or something like that from like 10 years ago. That's what they'll say. They're not about it. Like they talk a big game, but if it comes down to it, they're not going to do anything. Do
you see King Charles in the front line? Like, we were talking about this last week as well. George II, William.
Do you know what these guys will be like, right? You know, in the bit in Simpsons where they think the ants are going to invade or something like that.
The Corvair spacecraft has apparently been taken over, conquered, if you will, by a master race of giant space ants. It's difficult to tell from this vantage point whether they will consume the captive Earthmen or merely enslave them. One thing is for certain, there is no stopping them. The ants will soon be here. And I, for one, welcome our new insect overlords. I'd like to remind them that as a trusted TV personality, I can be helpful in rounding up others to toil in their underground sugar caves.
He goes, I for one, Ken Brockman's I for one, welcome our new overlords. That's what they're going to be like. Let's be honest. Let's be honest now.
I think Michael Danbury, the GB News presenter, you aware of that guy?
I've probably seen him.
I don't watch GB News, bro. Come on.
I do. It's gold.
That's
trash.
Who are you?
Yeah.
Trash.
There's a presenter on there, and he was saying, "Nah, not gonna fight." I'm like, so you want Putin to win? I don't understand if it's either you get recruited and you fight Putin or you don't.
Do you know what we should do, right? We should tell Boris Johnson, if you really want to be like Churchill, you got to be on the front lines like Churchill was in the Boer. It wasn't he fighting in the Boer War? Or was it at least
World War
reported?
One and Boer War.
Yeah.
Yeah, you know, you got to be like, if you want to be like Churchill, you got to go out there, man. People remember you for that. The ultimate trick to playing Boris Johnson.
Could you imagine Rishi Sunak?
Johnson would hire a body double to do it.
So Sunak could be there. You know, it wasn't Napoleon leading his army. You know, Rishi Sunak could be out there like Napoleon. You know.
Well, according to the Russians, you know, Boris Johnson did lead like an SAS commando raids on the Zaporizhia nuclear power plant. So,
What?
oh yeah, that was part of the Russian propaganda when Boris Johnson popped over. The Russians started claiming that he had led an SAS commando raid on the Zaporizhia nuclear power plant.
All I'm saying is, right, if Boris Johnson is taking out your guys, right, your guys have bigger problems. if it's Boris Johnson taking out, you know, if he's the one leading the charge here, you're in big trouble.
Little did you know, Boris Johnson behind you right now.
He's been in training fair. We've seen him jogging and being on the bike, to be fair. So maybe he's been training this whole time.
If I put down my credentials as being I completed Virtual Cop 2, came from the 90s. And you have to use a gun. You've got to shoot people and everything and make sure you don't shoot the innocents. Do you think that would be good enough credentials?
I wouldn't be boasted about it, but look, I've never played a war game in my life. I don't know nothing about war, you know. I'm not about it, so.
Hey, I finished, what is it, Mad Dog McCree.
Mad Dog McCree's gang is taking over the town. The mayor and his daughter have been taken hostage out to Mad Dog's hideout. Sheriff, he's locked up in jail. We're going to have to get him out to help with the gang. Can you help?
That was an arcade
remember
game.
Hey, you and me, Ollie, we've actually got battle experience with Warhammer.
I know.
So we understand cavalry tactics.
Have the strategic minds.
This isn't World War One anymore, guys, or the Boer War. There's no cavalry charge here. You run in there with a cavalry charge, and that tank unit is taking you out. The Polish military learned that firsthand. You do not do horse charges on tanks. They'll mess you up, man.
Good lesson from World War II is true, actually.
Yeah.
So is that a no from everyone then?
Yeah, well, one of the things I wanted to say was, because you had an idea about how you would improve this, how you would sell this. First of all, I think improve wages. I think that, again, has gone with sort of the budget cuts that we have seen the average serviceman wage being reduced. I think you do a lot more to help improve benefits. I think you certainly help to offer housing like we used to do. There was specific housing. I think there's still housing available actually in Edinburgh for ex-military service personnel from that area. The other thing I think that we do is we actually have a serious conversation about how much military spending we actually do. Currently, we are at 2.2, I think, GDP. I think current spending
NATO is minimum is 3, isn't it?
It's 2, I think.
2%. 2%. We are seeing other countries now match that because of what's going on in Ukraine. I think what we need to do is it needs to be 4%. I think military spending should be about 4%. And the reason why I think that is that a lot of our military capacity really needs to be built back up. We have seen this throughout all this war. Artillery production, especially from us, has been absolutely negligible. The Ukrainians are getting more artillery shells from South Korea than they are from all of Europe combined. That is
there
a
are
very
some
big
problems
threat.
with that.
Yeah, that's a very big problem for that as well. Not only that, but you've got to look at what's happened in Port Talbot. With the Port Talbot steel blast furnace closing down, we're losing 30% of our steel production capacity here in the UK. That steel is a really important natural resource. Well, not a natural resource,
Ollie,
but a strategic resource.
Ollie, can I ask, as you have your ear close to the ground when it comes to Labour, what do you see Labour investing in military spending in the next Parliament, or do you see them stepping away?
I think we're going to have to. I think that's going to have to have a serious conversation. I've said this before. I think the left doesn't focus on some really key areas, which I think they just cede almost to the right. I think it's foreign policy, business, and especially defense. There are very, very few people on the left who are sort of defense experts and specialists. They are all very, very much from the right side of politics. So,
I actually wrote a book on military strategy and tactics in the modern era, which I just completely forgot about.
Full of maps and facts.
Yeah,
full of maps and facts.
It might be the case that there's not just right, because there's a guy I follow, right? on YouTube. Oh, he does lines on maps. Let me see if I can find his name. Bear with me 1 second.
It's called Lines
I don't
on
think
Maps.
Is that his name? Is it Lines on Maps? There's no way his name
It's
is
Lines on Maps.
He's you know who I'm talking about. I don't think he's based on is William Spaniel. That's his name. And so I don't think he's that. I don't think he's that right wing, to be honest. I think the ones that they platform generally are for the right. They speak the old English and all that kind of stuff. So I don't know if that's true, but I think with the military spending, right, it's going to be subject to fiscal rules because that's all they talk about. Labour when it comes to that kind of stuff is fiscal rules. So I don't think Labour will increase. I think you got to, if we're spending 2.2%, you got to look at where the money's actually going, because austerity has played a large part in it, but also privatization and other things. These are things we need to look at. Maybe there are areas where we can spend the money better, because it's not just about having munitions, about precision munitions and all that kind of stuff. They're the expensive ones, but they're the ones worth having because you can actually hit things properly. So I think, like you said earlier, I think the UK does need to have a conversation about where we want to be because we're not a global navy power anymore. We haven't been for a long time. But if we still want to be a major player, especially with NATO, like we do need to buck up. Like, how are you going to have two ships crash into each other? Like, that's just embarrassing. Like, for all the stuff we've heard about the Russian Navy, we've not heard anything that embarrassing when you have one ship literally just crash into another. Like, what the hell's going on with that? I genuinely don't know. And then they asked Grant Shapps about it. He goes,
and in the Middle East, we have 3 mine hunters, and 2 of them collided in the last few days. One backed into the other, thinking it was going forward, but somebody wired up the engines in the wrong way, and the thing went into reverse. So now, instead of having 3 mine hunters, we've only got 1. It's pretty humiliating, isn't it?
Well, look, just as in aviation or many other walks of life, sometimes accidents and incidents happen. There's a full investigation.
But this was incompetence.
Well, look, you may know more than I know about it, in which case I've spoken to the First Sea Lord, who's in charge of the Navy. He has assured me that there is an investigation underway. And as with all of these things, we don't say it's incompetence when we see an aircraft come down, very rare occasion, just as this would be a rare occasion. It's right to leave the investigators some time to work out exactly what's gone wrong. Something clearly did, and we need to see what it is.
When he was interviewed about it, he said, well, you probably know more about it than I do.
He actually said
that to the journalist.
He might do. He might not have even been informed about it at that time.
It's more bumper cars than battleships, really, at that point. But honestly, it's kind of embarrassing that that kind of stuff's happening. Like, if you look at the salaries for soldiers, right, like for a private, it's 23,000, and just like that's not great for a person who's meant to take bullets for the country. In training, you're on about 18 and a half, which would be probably good if you're like 18 or 17, but like once you hit like 20, your early 20s, like you can make more than that in a full-time job. It's embarrassing.
You can make more on that working at McDonald's.
Honestly, and it's just like, we're expecting these people to hold, weapons of death effectively, and we're paying them very little for people that are expected to stay away from their families for, I think, half a year, generally, more than half a year. And like, of course, no one's going to sign up when you're offering nothing.
So if you then include, it's interesting you brought up McDonald's because we've got an obesity problem in this country. Stats came out today saying 25% of primary school children are now obese by the time they leave, which means that's shrinking your pool. I've heard members of the SAS and US Special Forces say we can't recruit. We're having a difficulty recruiting because people are unfit. So you're not even fit enough to be able to get in. And then on top of that, I mean, you're right.
Just lower the standard, make it easier.
No, let's not do that. Okay, that's not, the military is not something. These are not things you mess around with.
But you say that, if you just pointed out, if they're actually in a firefight and they're up all night, which is perfectly plausible, or for days, you work out their pay, it's below minimum wage.
I think it's 4 days off, 4 days on for one of the guys I was listening to, but he fought in Afghanistan. That was a long time ago. So I don't know if that still holds. Oh, that's something I could have asked about this actually, because my brother's mate's in the military. But I think generally it's something like that kind of routine where, it probably is below minimum wage, let's be honest, or not far off. It's embarrassingly low for people that have, their jobs are really difficult. And they're not going to have the money to have, to be able to afford to do self-care later on in life. And there'll be a big gap from when they leave the military to when they retire. And I don't think the government allocates for that. Like there's a lot of problems with homeless vets. And I know Johnny Mercer loves to talk about it and do nothing. And then he gets mad when people point that out. But I think that's the other thing as well, because I think people see that, like, when you see those veterans come back from Vietnam and you just think, what the hell happened over there? And when you send people into a war zone, yeah, it's not going to be as bad as Nam, but it's going to be pretty bad. And there's no aftercare for these people.
Flat. It doesn't matter what the scenario is. It's bad. You will get PTSD.
Again, that comes from more spending. If you have the right military spending, then the military can spend it on sort of the post operations things. They can look into sort of more mental health stuff. So again, this comes into more military spending and where that money gets spent for that money that is spent. Again, like I say, this is why I think the conversation should be had and we shouldn't be afraid to have the conversation, because it just gets closed down by
the problem is
war.
The problem is though, like the two major parties will be scared of that conversation because they're going to say we can't afford that. That's what they're going to say. It's going to be subject to fiscal rules. That's what's going to happen.
Yeah, we can afford it.
Just
based on what? That's not what they're saying though.
Okay, fiscal rules out the window. As soon as Rachel Reeves comes in, that's out the window.
What do you mean? Who based on what? That's fantasy.
That's out the window.
That's fantasy. No, it's not.
You're gonna have Keir Starmer come in into a Labour government, and he's gonna have to realise sort of the reality. He's gonna have to have tax rises. That is the first thing that is gonna happen. And you can have tax rises in this country, no problem. We pay low to medium what the rest of Europe pays. We can have higher taxes in this country that go towards paying more social services, more into the NHS, more into a military budget, more into growth and development opportunities in this country. It will happen.
So you're saying you guarantee it's going to happen? Rachel,
I won't guarantee it.
Who's she going to increase taxes on?
I won't guarantee it, but it'll happen. I think everyone's going to get tax rises.
Everyone across the board,
like in Europe.
The people that are lower middle earners, they're going to have their tax burden increased even more than it is now.
Probably.
Yeah, I think everyone's going to have it increased, but I think you're going to get more back from what you get.
I think there's an element of they're going to go in and they're going to have the realize. I think they already know. They just don't want to say it. They're going to go into office and they'll probably come out in the first few weeks and go, "We've now looked at the financial situation left over because we're now in charge. It is horrific. We're going to have to put in a number of things to deal with this situation." I mean, interesting enough, that doesn't include rejoining or declaring to rejoin the EU.
Again, I think that's going to be, I think they're going to come to the consensus that they have to. If you've lost 4% of your GDP from leaving the single market customs union, your only option is to rejoin. If you want to achieve proper growth in the UK, you've got to rejoin.
So what are you saying then? Are they in denial right now? Or are they lying to people? What is it then? If they're saying
I think they're being sensible at the moment, because you've got a situation where they don't know if Labour were to come out and say, right, we're going to rejoin single market and customs union, the Conservatives will just go, oh, absolutely amazing, happy days. They've given us something we can finally latch on and claw to. And this will be a 1992 situation all over again.
I mean, with the single market, the UK can't just rejoin the single market like that we've covered on the show.
Oh, no, that'll take time.
No, it won't happen. Outside of EFTA or joining the EU, that's not going to happen. And that's one we've covered ad nauseum on here. But honestly, so they're in denial. They're just lying to people. Which one would you say it is? Or playing the game, as it were?
No, they're playing the game. They're playing the game. They will have to rejoin. And you can rejoin the single market customs union. It is not beyond the realms of possibility. There is no one in Europe saying that we can't do that.
I mean, the EFTA countries have ruled out us joining EFTA. So outside of those two organizations, how are you going to do it? Like, what's your game here? What's your plan?
You will rejoin the single market customs union.
How? What are you going to do? Go to the Commission?
You go to the European Union and say we want to rejoin the single market customs union.
Other countries have tried that though. They've requested to join the single market and they've been told no.
Yeah, but we're in Europe. They're the ones you're asking out in Europe.
A number of things being said from the EU saying we don't want another Switzerland because that has been a complete nightmare. They don't want EFTA, and Norway has come out and categorically said we're not having the UK in EFTA because if they did,
they said that was fine. When we left, they said that was fine. They were saying
Norway
we're not really, but now they've said, oh no, that's fine. They relented after a while.
Wow.
So that position was fine. We could have done that. We could have gone into that.
I think you're correct in the sense that while the UK was still a member, it could say, okay, well, we can work something out. But now that it's completely left, I think to rejoin, the only way is through EU membership.
I've not seen any countries that specifically joined the just the customs union and the single market. From what I've seen, based on stuff I've talked about on this channel before, that countries have asked to join the single market first before they gain EU membership, and the EFTA countries effectively said no, we're not going to allow that because that would require a treaty change. So the only way into the single market is via EFTA or getting full EU membership. There's no join the
and
single
Northern
market.
Ireland's in the single market customs union. Technically, it would take a year,
bro. Like
you would
Northern
sign,
Ireland,
you'd sign it, you would get the ascension.
Northern Ireland are given a special dispensation because of the situation with Ireland being a member state and the fact that we were a member
Then
state.
why can't the rest of the UK be in?
Because we're not special. That's why. Northern
No,
Ireland
because
was
we
given
can just
special
ask.
dispensation.
We can just ask. We can just ask, and we can get in. They said when we left, they specifically said when they left, "Oh, we're not really sure. We don't want you in this." And then they relented, and then the position from the Brexiteers became, "No, actually, we don't want to do that." And then they pushed out, Theresa May.
Theresa May's deal, wasn't it?
Yeah, because what the EU didn't want was a hard
it is
border
entirely
on the
possible.
island of Ireland. That's why.
No, it's entirely possible to do it. It is not beyond the realms of fantasy. It is entirely doable. There is no country out there that is specifically now saying if the UK wanted to rejoin the single market and customs union, there is no one out there. There is no
the
There is an actual very good Yorkshire saying for that, actually, which is "Don't ask, don't get." So you can always turn around and have that as a thing. It then depends on whether or not they're willing to do it. The other thing I could see as a backlash from that would be I could see the Brexiteers going nuts, going, well, now we're a rule taker. This is even. I mean, Farage has actually said that. That would be a worse situation, which is why he hated May's deal so much. Go ahead, Max. You haven't spoken.
It's exactly. So it would actually be better to rejoin the European Union because then you'd be at the table making the decisions. While just being, I don't want to disagree with you, Ollie, but I don't see a way into the European Union I don't see a way into just the single market and the customs union without being an EU member, especially for a country like the UK, because there are special cases made for very small places, small islands, and Northern Ireland is a very particular case. But I think a country like the UK, a massive economy like that, the European Union said, no, if you want to be in, you have to be through EU membership. I don't see
for a country that's like ours, that's as big as ours, the EU is not going to say no. The idea that they would say no to an economy that's on its doorstep that is going to cause potentially massive problems if it diverges even more. We are seeing that now. We literally have every single business out there saying, please, for the love of God, align with the EU. Do not diverge. Please,
but that's in the UK.
Please keep up with
in the EU.
We just signed an alignment deal. We've done it before. We could easily get back in. It is doable.
Alex, can you do me a favor?
I do not see why we couldn't.
Can you throw in the clip of Tobey Maguire? He says, "I missed the part where that's my problem."
I need that money.
I missed the part where that's my problem.
Because that's what they're going to turn around and say to you. I missed the part where that's my problem. That's all that's going to happen.
I would turn around and go,
no, we're not. There's no. There is not that negative positivity. There is not that. That does not exist.
I'm going to say this for the EU's perspective. Maybe it would be better if we were just a rule taker, and then we're in the single market and customs union, and we've got no say at the table.
The reason why.
Feedback, hold on, Madge. The feedback you seem to always get over and over again from politicians that have tweeted is that we were a pain in the neck when we were in there. Now, I don't think that's a bad thing. I think having two perspectives within any democracy could be really advantageous because it gets you to really assess and test whether or not your point of view is correct, and therefore you're probably more likely to make a better assessment as a result. So I wonder if the EU might go, you know what, we'll take their market. We've already extracted a lot of stuff. There were horrific statistics that I saw today showing what's happened to our services. Services have pretty much flatlined, gone exponential in Ireland and the Netherlands, which appears to look as if our service industry collapsed and it moved into the EU, which is mainly Holland and Ireland, which is incredible. I think Ireland took 37% of
I think France has taken some as well.
Yeah,
Frankfurt.
But I think Ireland took the biggest chunk.
It makes sense.
I can see logic on both sides of this. I'm probably more likely to think, in the long run, the better way forward is that we fully rejoin. Maybe we could do it in part. We've got to ask if we're going to do that. But I mean, even before we get into that stage, we're going to have a referendum and go back to the public and go, are you happy with this deal?
Don't have to for EU single market and UK for single market and customs union access. We don't have to because remember, Leave's position was No one is talking about leaving the single market. Only a fool would leave the single market.
Absolutely nobody is talking about threatening our place in the single market.
Yeah, but we quote Daniel Hannan,
Daniel
aka
Hannan, yeah.
the brain of Brexit.
But that's not what was on the actual ballot.
No,
And David Cameron definitely also said, and this is the joy and the confusion. Like, I've always said that Brexit and the referendum was like being told, there's a buffet, pick whatever you want. Whereas we just had, the Remain side just had, this is it. What you've got now is it. There's no change. That's your meal. Eat it or not. And so because of that, David Cameron 100% said, if you vote to leave, we are removing ourselves.
We are approaching one of the biggest decisions this country will face in our lifetimes, whether to remain in a reformed European Union or to leave.
Now, Daniel Hannan also caused confusion. I think Farage caused confusion by saying Norway
of 19, effectively with a Norwegian-type deal, which is not what the people of this country voted for, which is not what the people of this country voted for. Well, I have to say that everybody from David Cameron to half this panel say, wouldn't it be terrible if we were like Norway and Switzerland? Really? They're rich, they're happy, they're self-governing. Actually, Norway can afford to give people money. It's rich. It's successful. Norway. They're rich. They top the world's happiness index. They're allowed to catch their own fish. It would be ghastly if this country was like Norway. Can you imagine it? Rich, free, catching your own fish. Norway sells 75% of its overseas goods to the European marketplace. It trades with the European marketplace at a premium. It has opted to be a member of the European Economic Area, which is, in a sense, an anti-room for European Union.
He would say they'd have to pay the cash and have none of the decision-making power.
Well, that is straightforward untrue, because actually they don't pay their money to Brussels, they pay their money directly to some of the poorer emerging southern and eastern European countries. Norway. They will put up with some of the rules, but they won't put up with all of the rules. But this idea that somehow life is worse in Norway and Switzerland. I heard Commissioner Pascal Lamy, the Trade Commissioner, say, but if Britain was to reject the Lisbon Treaty, we would be relegated to a country the status of Norway. Rich, free, catching your own.
That's what they wanted, though. They wanted to say, like, our destiny's in our hands. We can pick whatever model we want. But just to go back to some of the points you made, Alex, like, could you imagine the UK as a rule taker, the amount of problems we would cause? We would cause all sorts of problems. We'd constantly moan. We'd constantly moan about stuff. You had one of the.
We would just take the rules and live with it.
You had one of the major politicians in Norway a few years ago said, "No, we don't want you in EFTA because you'd ruin it for each other, just like you ruined it for yourselves."
Yeah, and
that was Norway's position. They didn't relent.
No, they relented.
What, Norway relented?
Position.
Norway relented. I'd love to see a source on that, because we can't join EFTA. If they wanted to, if that was the case, then we could join EFTA. We can get single market access. It wouldn't be a big deal.
Yeah, they relented. It was they said they moaned about it, and then they relented and said, no, if you want to join that,
we're going to have to hire someone now, you realize, because of this. And they're going to have to be our researcher that we hire in to come in the background and like fact check everything and make sure it's true. Well, I'm going to move us on because there was something else that you wanted to bring up, Ollie.
Well, I know it's in here.
Oh, it's in there.
Written by Ian Dunt.
Okay. I'm going to move us on regardless of that, because I wanted to bring up Alaska, which you brought up. So, Ollie, please tell us what's happening in Alaska and Russia.
Okay. Essentially, the story doesn't really start in Alaska. It starts in Moscow. About 2 days ago, Vladimir Putin signed what is essentially a new decree to say that historical Russian property in any of the old Soviet Union states or Russian imperial states are now owned, or should still be, shall we say, the property of today's modern Russia. This included, of course, Alaska, as was said, but it also includes places like the Baltic states, the Grand Duchy of Finland, to give it its old, Russian imperial name, Moldova, Romania, a large part of Poland, and also sweeping right into Western Germany as well, because they are still claiming a lot of stuff from when it was built by by the Soviet Union. They still own that. So it seems to be a large attempt to try and increase more destabilization in these areas. And it's worrying to see what this is actually going to do, because a large section of the Russian budget, which, bear in mind, already been spent in the war in Ukraine, is now being spent on this. So the question is, what is this going to entail? What do they mean when Putin means they can go search and reclaim these properties? That's a very big worrying question. And even more worrying when you've got the nationalists on Telegram saying, we might want to, shall we say, go retake places like Alaska and just turn up, because there was a Russian businessman who put up a big sign a year ago saying, this is ours. So, yeah, this seems to be the deliberate attempt to start a territorial dispute with the United States. But it also has, I think, very much deep implications for Eastern Europe when it comes to, shall we say, things that Russia used to own, whether it used to be under the Soviet Union or, of course, the Russian Empire.
Yes.
Well, they own about, 20% of London. So does London also now come under that? Is that where we're heading with London and the whole of Europe? That includes Germany, Eastern Germany.
They're going to retake Chelsea Football Club, aren't they? They're going to take it back.
This is what I think many people think why Putin's done it, because there's been a lot of talk recently about liquidating the Russian assets and giving it to Ukraine. I think that would be a very good idea. But there's a conversation in Japan happening at the moment in there saying that, is this actually illegal under international law? The Japanese are very, very hesitant to actually do that. Because they've got a lot of assets still in Russia. They weren't able to pull them out in time for this before the sanctions kicked in. So they've got a lot of assets that they would lose liquidity-wise from them, which would hurt their economy quite in a significant way. So they're quite worried about if other countries start doing this. But I think it's only going to take one to start going, well, there you go, Ukraine, that's all yours now. But we'll see what happens.
I was saying this off air. This is no different to what Israeli groups have been doing in the West Bank. They'll turn up and just go, "That's our house," and take it using force. I even said, I think there was a case where 20 Palestinians were killed by what can only be described as people who claim to be Israeli settlers moving into the territory and pushing them out. And it's just a slow noose around the area and tightening it very slowly. It seems like Putin's literally going to go, well, they can do it, so can I. And it's an old age tactic. It's no different to what Hitler did with the Sudetenland in Czechoslovakia. He said, that's a German population. They want to rejoin Germany. We should be able to take it over. I mean, the worst part about that was the fact that the British and the French signed over foreign territory that didn't belong to them to the German
The Munich
state.
Agreement. Yeah, but he held up the paper and he looked like a right prat.
Yeah. Peace in Europe by giving away someone's land that I don't own and I'm not in charge of, and we've not asked their permission. I mean,
yeah.
And then he's hailed as a victor. It's just, I mean,
he gave away their complete, a lot of their good land as well that they could have used for defense. There's a big mountainous terrain there.
Yeah, including, I think, the Skoda works as well, believe it or not, which was just like, I think, don't quote me on that. But
We've all played Hoi 4. We all know where the best defensive territory is in Czechoslovakia.
You need guns or cars. Skoda Armaments has you covered.
Well,
but
interestingly,
do we see this?
that is how. I'm sorry, Max. I'll just say this. That is literally how they took over the Germans took over the Skoda factory and used it for building tanks, and that's how they upped their armory. Max, sorry.
No, I was just wondering. So it's very interesting in regards to Alaska. So, are we going to see Russian assets being placed in or near Alaska? And how would they? And I was going to ask, how would the Americans respond to this? Well, the Americans would respond in a sort of logical way, but maybe after November 4th, or it was 5th, 4th, whatever it is, maybe they will respond in a different way.
I don't know, bro. I think what we'll see is pew, 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 America. That's all we'll see.
Like, well, they already have responded.
I don't think. I think if people see, if those Americans see someone who looks hostile, these people are armed to the teeth as is. They don't need a reason. Like, honestly, if you think the green men are just going to run up on Alaska, like, I guarantee you half those people are armed. Like, they've got to deal with like, all sorts of wild animals like wolves and stuff.
Yeah, they'll
like,
unleash Sarah Palin.
They're definitely packing here. Sarah Palin's going to come out there with the MG, being like, "Get out of here." But honestly, it's just no. Don't.
A lot of it isn't populated. They could turn up and live there for 50 years, and no one would know that they were there. They could be there now. They've been there 20 years, living there.
I think if they've gone past the US Navy, then fair enough, because the US monitors that stuff real close. So if they've ducked past the Navy, then fair. Maybe you get a pass at that point.
Yeah, there's a flag somewhere in Alaska. Even if you get to take it, congratulations, Russia, it's yours now.
Maybe they've had a Russian flag there for like the last few hundred years, and then Russia going to come back and like, look, our flag was here first.
Built up empires. We stole countries. That's what you do. That's how you build an empire. We stole countries with the cunning use of flags. Yeah. You just sail around the world and stick a flag in. I claim India for Britain. And they go, you can't claim us. We live here. 500 million of us. Do you have a flag?
But then doesn't that mean that all the tribes that were there should then own it over Russia? Because Russia's only had it for, 150? And there were tribes in the area way before that.
Yeah, but
although they didn't understand contracts, so
as well.
Yeah, it's a can of worms there.
Yeah.
The Canadians and the people in the USA are going to have a rough old time if you start putting that kind of
don't mess with the Canadians. Did you know this? Shockingly, did you know that the Canadians have probably the biggest war crime committing record on scale?
Well, they can't beat the Japanese. There's no way they've beaten the Japanese. Is it impossible?
Oh, they have.
No way. Ain't no way. Ain't no way.
More.
Ain't no way they've beaten.
Tell us more, Ollie.
Yes. So yeah, the Canadians have on record the highest committing of war crimes. So they once, I believe, in World War One, told a bunch of German prisoners that they were going to throw food to them. They threw grenades. There was they've done quite a lot of stuff. So if you ever hear the sound of what is it, some Canadian pop star, Brian Adams, and the smell of maple syrup, run the other way very quickly.
I've seen their ice hockey is pretty violent, so them being friendly people is a ruse. Don't play ice hockey with them. Don't play ice hockey with them.
It's one of the few sports where you can stop the sport and bring in a fight.
All they do is
chess boxing.
They grab the other guy and they just start punching each other with right hands, and it's hilarious.
And then the
they're trying not
referee
to fall
comes
over.
over and just watches.
It's just
yeah, the referee's like, make sure it's a clean fight. I don't want to see any cheating here.
Yeah, but then the ref comes in with the steel chair.
The ref goes in with the RKO out of nowhere.
Yeah, but that's like I say, ice hockey, violent sport.
Are they basically like? We're heading for World War III, aren't we? If they keep doing, if everyone's provoking like they are right now, you got North Korea, you've got the stuff in the Middle East, you've got stuff like both with Israel, Gaza, you've got the stuff going on in Yemen, you've got stuff going on in Africa that's not really being reported in the news in terms of like coups being supported by what's the
by Russia, the Africa Corps,
by Wagner,
the Russian Africa Corps, or Wagner,
Wagner
as well.
And then it just seems that the tensions.
China,
Taiwan, Japan has had a couple of missiles go over the top of it from North
Japan
Korea.
have started rearming as well, so that's going to be interesting. I think they're either debating it or they've decided to start rearming.
Yeah, 78 missiles North Korea launched last year.
We got Trump saying he'll pull out of NATO if he gets in, and Steve Bannon going on record, who was Trump's right-hand man for election in his first election, going on and saying, yeah, we don't give a crap about the eastern part of Ukraine.
It would be appalling for peace in the world if Putin, hangs on to a large chunk, about a third of Ukraine, as a result of an illegal invasion.
The eastern Russian-speaking border of Ukraine is not in the vital national security interest of the United States. What's in the vital national security of the United States is the southern border of the United States, about our sovereignty, our territorial integrity, and in addition, starting to have our NATO partners start to be an alliance and stop being a protectorate. The first thing the Europeans ought to start thinking about is you've got to get up to the 2%, which I think the United Kingdom does in Poland, but you have to become an alliance, not a protectorate. A strong NATO alliance where the individual nation states are actually getting militaries and paying 2% of their GDP, which they committed to with the United States as an alliance partner, not an overall security guarantee by the United States, is the way to thwart Russian aggression.
I mean, I don't think, at present, I don't think Trump's going to win, believe it or not. I think the Iowa stats were actually quite interesting. I think only 17% of Republicans actually came out and voted, but he still won with a landslide. But you're going, if he can only get out 17%, but it is the primaries as well, so you're a bit like, you can take it in several different directions.
I'm really hoping that when it comes to Trump, is that people will look back and go, no, what did he actually do for us when he was in charge?
I mean, if you look back at him and you realize he's the guy who told you to inject Lysol, then you realize that's not less of that, not him.
Yeah,
But
but
most
the problem
Americans
is
look at
these voters don't care. That's the big problem. You've also got to remember in 2020, it was the biggest electoral turnout in American history. And it was also the biggest electoral turnout for the Republicans and Democrats. So the danger, I think, becomes for this presidential election is that the Democrats don't turn out.
Yeah.
Because I think that's the problem. There's a lot of like Biden malcontent going around. That Biden hasn't really done anything, he hasn't really achieved anything or anything like that, when in reality he has. The Inflation Reduction Act, something else we probably have to talk about at one point, like the Inflation Reduction Act, the impact it's having on the UK and Europe at the moment is absolutely incredible. It is sucking technology and jobs from the UK and America like crazy. The works
from
and
the
ways
UK and America. Do you mean from the UK to America?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So the Works and Ways and Means Committee, which has been sort of responsible for like workers' rights, there have been some fantastic moves and wins for unions and workers' rights in America come from Biden. So there's been a lot of stuff actually going on, but they just haven't talked about it. So
no scandals.
Yeah,
like even the Hunter Biden thing has been very much. Well, we've seen records.
It's a Republican pushed thing, isn't it?
Yeah,
pretty well. I mean, it looks like it happened. It's just that some of the major news corps just ignored it, as well as some of the major social media groups. I think Facebook and I can't remember, maybe TikTok looked like they suppressed, or it's been claimed they suppressed the release or the pushing of that type of material, the Hunter Biden thing. But it's not Biden himself. I mean, we can argue that because he was vice president.
That's what they're trying to tie it to. That Biden was involved as well. But there's no evidence. There's no tie to that. Just that Biden just happens to be his son. But if that's the case, Jared Kushner and Trump with his, and so turnabout's fair play if they do that, I suppose.
I think the biggest two problems that Biden's facing is inflation, which I think is affecting a lot of Americans, but also his response to the situation in Gaza has been especially bad, considering he's a guy who could probably end this. Like, he could stop this. So I think that's one of the big things that are going to cause a lot of apathy with people in America. The argument of Trump could be worse. It just doesn't hold when one country's committing genocide. Like, it doesn't make sense.
Do you think that by November, and I hate to use this term, but it will be resolved? And then it won't be such an issue for Biden?
I don't think it's going to be resolved by November. I think Israel are going to look to keep a security force in Gaza for as long as they can. And it's going to be very much like more of an occupation, if that makes sense. It'd be more of a physical occupation. I think that's how I can see this go down, probably at least a good few months.
There was a very interesting thing that got pointed out to me. Are you aware of the project taking place in Saudi Arabia called Neon, the huge line that they're building?
Yeah, they caused a lot of problems. They kicked out a lot of tribes in those areas to build that stupid thing, and it was not good times.
So when you look at it from the global map, you're going, why on earth would you have it connecting to the sea at that particular point, parallel with the Suez Canal? But I also know they're building a giant port there, and they're building a giant tech center there, all on the coast. I was going, why are they building all that stuff on the coast? But if you also listen to Netanyahu, who 2 weeks or 3 weeks before October 7th did a thing in the UN where he showed this map and he said,
but I believe that we are at the cusp of an even more dramatic breakthrough, an historic peace between Israel and Saudi Arabia. Such a peace will go a long way to ending the Arab-Israeli conflict. It will encourage other Arab states to normalize their relations with Israel. Now look at what happens when we make peace between Saudi Arabia and Israel. The whole Middle East changes. We saw another blessing already in sight. In the G20 conference, President Biden, Prime Minister Modi, and European and Arab leaders announced plans for a visionary corridor that will stretch across the Arabian Peninsula and Israel, the blessing of a new Middle East between Israel, Saudi Arabia, and our other neighbors. We will not only bring down barriers between Israel and our neighbors, we'll build a new corridor of peace and prosperity that connects Asia through the UAE, Saudi Arabia, Jordan, Israel, to Europe. This is an extraordinary change, a monumental change, another pivot of history.
And there's rumor kicking off that he's going to be building, part of that corridor is going to be bypassing the Suez Canal and having a secondary canal. That canal, if you look at it on a global map and you look at basically that there's a mountain range, how do you cut through that? Well, the easiest and quickest and shortest route from the Arabian Sea all the way over to the Mediterranean is along the Egyptian and Israeli border. And guess what it has to go through? If that is what they're going to construct, it's got to go through Gaza, the border with Gaza and Egypt. And then you're going, right, so Saudi Arabia aren't pressing this and they're not taking sides, or apparently not taking sides, but they're economically starting to entangle themselves with Israel. And they've just got these huge projects, coastal projects, and they all just so happen to be in the same direction as where this canal's going to go. Makes you wonder, is everyone being played here quite handsomely in terms of what's actually going on? Because I'm looking at it and going, well, it seems that there's a good chance. Let's put it this way. If it turns out that Israel just goes, right, we're taking over Gaza, it's now our jurisdiction, and then you get a canal through that, I'm not going to be shocked. And it seems to make a lot of sense because economically, that would be a massive, massive bonus to both Israel, Saudi Arabia, and unfortunately, it might cost us Gaza. Am I being a bit cynical here?
I don't think so, because I think Saudi Arabia has said that they do want a two-state solution to the Palestinian solution, and they are willing to sort of normalize relations with Israel so long as there is a plan proposed to getting towards that. So I don't think they would suddenly sort of jeopardize that entire project by building a canal, which, to be honest, if they do want to build that, the Suez Canal took, 8 years, I think, to build. So I think they would see it a mile coming away if they would suddenly start building a canal.
And Saudi Arabia's got to diversify. It cannot have oil as its primary resource. So how do you do it? Well, ports and trade routes are normally like one of the biggest ways of making money. Go on, Max. I can see you nodding.
No. I'm listening and I agree. Yeah, I think you're right.
We'll have to wait and see. Unfortunately, that we're at the end of the show.
Oh.
Guys, thank you so much.
Thanks so much, guys.
Cool. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Be sure to tune in next week for another exciting story from the files of Police Squad.